Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Level 2 recording for Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, Lesson 10, and this presentation is all about the connection between the human endocannabinoid system and the stellar network of neurology to which we are connected, and to the occupiers of the interstices. And if I'm sitting at a strange angle, it's because I have a little sleeping person on my lap down here, and so just try to keep her comfortable. So, first, I have to talk about the time vortex diagram, and this is the advanced class, so everyone in here already knows what I'm referring to. Clear out from level 1. Okay. So the time vortex is the lower quadrant of this yellow sculpture. Anyone who does not know what I'm talking about and what I'm drawing here, and I always draw it like this. It's not working. Sorry, I don't know why my thing isn't working. Let's do this better. Oh, I'm waking up the princess. She's looking at me. Okay, let's make red is the color of this going up here. Okay, so in the recorded lessons, I do not adequately describe this and explain this, so I'm going to describe it and explain it here. The idea that there are two different approaches or descriptions of what can happen to consciousness. So I have to actually define terms here. This area where I'm scribbling in green, we would call that area is called being alive. You are in time, submerged in time, embedded in the time field, and flowing through time the same way like a fish swims through the river, right? If you are over here, where I'm making the squiggly black lines, you are dead. You are on the membrane of death. So if you are like a baseball or an arrow that is flying in a trajectory and you fly in this direction and you end up there, you are on the membrane of death. You are dead. And consciousnesses that end up on the membrane of death are not supposed to be eternal. They are supposed to be temporary. The word temporary comes from temporal, meaning embedded in time. They are like term papers that have not been saved in the great, hard drive of the cosmos. Now let's contrast that with consciousnesses that are aligned with this central core timeline. And I call that core timeline the path of least likelihood. It is the Ascension Timeline. Ascension here in this class meaning not Christian rapture and also not Calgon take me away, New Age escapism, but is instead metamorphosis, transformation from physical, slowed down light body to mass that has accelerated and is now made out of light body. That's what happens on this red line. So you don't die. When you're on this red line, you get to escape this level of reality or exit the wormhole where I'm making this red circle over here, like a little volcano. You get to poof, come out of the volcano, but you don't do it by dying. So this timeline actually comes from over here, actually coming from this direction, spiral up the middle, and then you don't stop. You keep on going. It is an endless journey as opposed to getting stuck on the membrane of death. It's kind of like saying, we joke about this in this class, wonk, wonk, game over, try again. It's just like Pac-Man. You do the wrong thing and then it goes, and you die and you need to try again. So the difference between these two levels of consciousness is how long it takes. I realized in the introduction that I was saying on Facebook today, I needed to distinguish this. I know that there's a lot of people in this time and place who don't even know, I'll go back to my face, about afterlife. Is afterlife a thing? Does afterlife exist? Where does consciousness go when you die? What happens to you? Like, I understand that I'm in a world and I'm sharing these ideas and insights with a group of people that many people don't know anything about whether afterlife exists or what happens to you or where you go. And that mostly there is the religious description from various established earth religions of what happens to your existence after you die. So I need to make a distinction on all of this. Consciousness can exist independent of biological and neurological structure. That means that it's different than what science says. Science says first you built a brain, and the brain, consciousness arose as a phenomenon spontaneously out of the brain. And that's not what I believe, and that's not what I perceive. I perceive consciousness as existing as a thing. Here's the thing called consciousness. And then a brain is grown, and then consciousness can go into the brain. And then when the brain is no longer there, for whatever reason, consciousness can still exist. This is different than science's understanding of what consciousness is. I'll get to your question, because I see there's a good question coming there. So let's talk about, or make a distinction between death as opposed to ascension. So death is the physical cessation of metabolism in the body and the cessation of genetic dance movements. You're dead. You don't have a magnetosphere. You don't have chakras spinning around you anymore. And also your consciousness now resides on that flowing membrane of death. And that means all of the things that you did during your life and all of your accumulation of experiences and everything that you ever, saw and thought and did and said goes on the membrane of death and gets stuck there. That's like your hard drive and your accumulation of data from your life experience. That's not what is supposed to happen. What's supposed to happen is that we're supposed to be coming from the stellar network, where I said you're coming from here, coming from down here, and then you come into reality, which would, this is life, where I'm making this heavy red line. And then you're supposed to keep on going. You're supposed to keep on going. That's what we're supposed to do. We come, from a level of consciousness, experience life. We're still connected to that level of consciousness. And then we're supposed to exit this level of consciousness all as an unbroken experience. So let me also talk about this red line, this path of least likelihood, what I'm drawing there, as also being analogous to DNA and looking down the time tunnel. So I used this last week. I have to find the right pictures. They're over here somewhere. Hold on a minute. Where's those pictures? Some of them are right over here. Time tunnel is what I'm looking for. This one? Nope. Well, that's DNA. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. I'm squinting and scrolling and looking down here. I'll find it. It's right over here. Oh, I know where it is. Here we go. There we go. And now, I'm sorry, I'm at this very strange angle. Good. So I used this last week in talking about DNA. First of all, this is an actual scanning electron microscope image of what DNA looks like in a cross-section. So you're looking down the tunnel of DNA. You're looking at a spiral of DNA that's been kind of like a spring that's been cut, and that's what this center of that spring looks like. I used this also to show you last week. It's a screenshot from a wonderful app that's called Musical DNA that I encourage and invite everyone to look into. And also there's another app called Center Punch, that this is a screenshot from that. And all of these loops that you're looking at, those are like loops of DNA. In the app, it shows you that this is a way of understanding notes, like musical notes, and that those musical notes fit together to form a polygon, and that each chord is like a loop on that DNA spiral. So each generation is like a chord. Each generation is like it accumulates together. And as we're looking down the time tunnel, we start off with these loops over here would be the most recent generations. And they're like, here's your parents' generation, and here's grandparents' generation. And if you keep on looking down this tunnel, you go all the way back in time to your most ancient ancestors, okay? So now we're understanding that DNA is like a tunnel of time. And you're looking down this tunnel, and you're the most recent musical expression of what's going on, but you're just the most recent note or chord in that symphony, and you have all of these other previous generations that add up to this present moment now. Let me just drink a little something here. When you are on that path of least likelihood, the central core timeline that runs up and down this structure, it is like looking down that time tunnel. You look into antiquity, and you are connected to your ancestors that are eternal beings. This is the distinction between these two aspects of self. The central core timeline is or are all of the consciousnesses that are eternal. Everybody who made the audition. In order to get into this band, you got to make the audition. You got to do the right things. And then you pass the audition and then you're in the band. Everybody who ended up on the membrane of death did not make the audition. Some of them smashed their guitars on stage. Some of them farted up the joint. Some of them played like the worst music ever, and they died. That's what death is. It is the end result of playing very, very poor music. So when you are in alignment with that central core timeline, you are literally looking at all of the ancestors of the past and all of the descendants of the future that are playing the right music. Everybody's in tune. Everybody's totally cool. Everybody's playing the right music. And those are eternal selves, eternal aspects of self. That means that they continue to be in existence, as opposed to the non-eternal aspects of self that do not get to keep on being in existence. I'll just draw it for you because that's easier and you can actually see it. So here, these are the eternal aspects of self. That's melodies that are so perfect and good that they get to keep on being in the song of life. And then these over here, consciousness residues that are on the membrane of death, are crappy songs that don't get to keep being a part of the membrane of life. And each one of us has these potentials within us. Some of us, it's not like saying, oh, some people are good and some people are bad. No, everybody has crappy songs inside of them. Don't play the crappy songs. Only play the good songs. So what is supposed to happen in this map of reality is when you die, which means that you went askew like this, you went and followed that black arrow and you ended up as like this black dot over here that I'm drawing in a very messy way, over here on the membrane of death. You got stuck there. Good people or whatever that played a crappy song, they're like, oh, I played a crappy song and I died. Let me stop playing that song. Let me erase that song, or let it go into a state of silence and then go back to the beginning and try again. That's what like a good person would do. And what evil beings have done for a very long time is intentionally play crappy music, get themselves stuck on the membrane of death, and then refuse to stop playing their song for a very long amount of time. That's like saying their consciousness residue continues to be in existence thousands of years after their death, even though they are not eternal beings. It's a slow dissolve pill, like slow release, super slow release, so slow release that it's like causing a lot of suffering to all of us. That's not what is supposed to be happening here. We are supposed to have an instantaneous dampening of the song. That's entropy, ending those vibrations from being in existence as soon as they hit the membrane of death. So there's been this artificial augmentation of the vibrations on the membrane of death that allows them to continue to be in existence far past their expiration date of what they're supposed to be. And that's the suffering that is affecting you and me. The siphoning off of life force energy from the alive area into the death area. And that is never supposed to happen. Now I want to talk about the human endocannabinoid system. I'll go to the whiteboard to talk it out. It's a little bit challenging for me to do this because my little dog is like on my lap and also halfway onto my computer keyboard too. She is like totally draped upon everything. So, and I'm like kind of like trying not to disturb her while I draw. Here is one neuron, and it's very simplified. Like the neural impulse comes from this direction and it flows along this neuron, and then it gets to this area over here, and there's a gap. And then this is the next neuron over here like this. And in order for the neural signal to get across this gap over here, it has to first be translated into a chemical signal. So we'll make like little red dots. Look, I'm chemicals, now I'm chemicals, I'm chemicals, I'm little red dots. I'm going across that gap. It's called the synaptic cleft. I jump across the synaptic cleft, which is also analogous to the leap of the electron from one level of excitement to the next level of excitement. And then I, as a neural impulse, continue to flow in this direction on the nerve system. So science up until this point, up until very, very recently, thought that the nerve system was a one-way street. Like here's your brain over here, and we're going to send a neural signal from your brain to your big toe. That's it, brain to big toe. And then your big toe will respond and will send a neural signal from toe to brain. But these are two different like one-way streets. That is how science looked at the nerve system of the human body for a really long amount of time. Only recently has science recognized that there is such a thing called an endocannabinoid system. Endo meaning within. I'll write it out for you. Oops, spell it right. This means naturally occurring or internally occurring cannabinoid system. So many people have been laboring under the delusion that the only source of cannabinoid chemicals comes from a particular plant, cannabis, and there are some that are in other plants too. But cannabis, the cannabinoids are actually a naturally occurring chemical in our own body. For most of the time that science has been studying neurology, like the 20th century, our bodies have been depleted of cannabis. So this has to do with cultural stuff. So now I'm going to go back to ancient teachings here. So teaching about ancient times on Earth. More than 5,000 years ago, the land that we now call China got its name China. It literally means land of hemp. It's one of the places where civilization emerged and became organized on a larger scale. And what made that possible was the plant that's known as hemp, both the seed in order to grow for food and for the oil, and also the medicines and the fibers contained in the plant made it possible for civilization to occur. And very little of the way that the plant was used was for smoking and psychedelic ingestion. Much of it was eaten raw. That means not psychedelic, because there's a process called decarboxylation. This is what happens when you take cannabis and you either dry it or you heat it. It decarboxylates, meaning it has a molecular change. The molecule gets smaller, so it can now cross the blood-brain barrier. When it is raw, it does not cross the blood-brain barrier. I already drank my smoothie several hours ago, but this was a delicious raw cannabis smoothie where I had hemp milk, hemp seed, and fresh frozen cannabis from my garden from last year that I just put in a jar in the freezer, and I just freeze the whole buds and blueberries. And I blend it up in the middle of the winter when I need some liquid sunlight, and I drink that. It is not psychedelic. I'm completely clear-headed and able to stay focused in my presentation today. And it gives my body all these wonderful nutrients. So all of this in order to say that cannabis and hemp were literally the basis for human civilization thousands of years ago, and have been used throughout human civilization, to sustain life for across many different cultures, many different continents here on our planet. In the United States, for a long time in the United States, like let's say 1700s, 1800s, hemp, which is related to cannabis, these are two different phenotypes or physical expressions of the same basic genetic potential. The people in the United States here, like the young country that had just been created, they grew a lot of hemp, and hemp was really needed at that time. It was part of the, used for making fiber for ropes for the big ships that had tall masts and many sails. And that was a military application. They didn't have power boats back then. They had ships with masts. So growing hemp was a big part of being able to create an effective navy. And so it was required. The people here were like, yeah, grow hemp. We need that rope. We need it for our navy, right? So it was a big part of our world. And even before World War II, there's weedy hemp, which is just, it grows naturally uncultivated in the American Midwest. And there are farmers that specifically grew hemp. And what they would do is they would use the hemp for fiber, and then the leaves were used for silage, S-I-L-A-G-E. This is a way of taking plant matter, like you can cut down a meadow. It can be anything. I just need to rearrange my chair here. It can be anything. Take that plant matter and you ferment it, and it makes the nutrients more bioavailable to the ruminants that eat it. So what the farmers used to do, in World War II, they would grow hemp for the war effort, and then they would feed the hemp leaves, the excess that was not able to be used, to their farm animals. They fed it to their cows and their pigs and their chickens. And these raw, non-decarboxylated versions of cannabinoids went into the milk and the meat and the eggs of all of those farm products. And they were cannabinoids were a part of the United States food system. It was in the milk that everybody got. It was in the beef that they ate. It was in the cows that they ate. After World War II, when cannabis was made completely and hemp was made completely illegal in this country, it was no longer in the food supply. And so not only after World War II was there an increase in processed foods, canned and preserved foods and processed and frozen foods, and reduction in nutrients in that sense, but also the foods themselves no longer had the inherent cannabinoids. Breast milk, human breast milk has cannabinoids in it. It is a building block of life. It is a building block of neurological health and also consciousness. Like, it's in breast milk because it helps babies' brains to grow. Like, it's part of humanness. There's a reason why you have an endocannabinoid system. The whole point of me giving you this history lecture, and I'm just rearranging on my chair because my dog is like a little bit heavy and it's a little bit, there we go, now I can sit like this. I'm giving you this history lecture on the history of hemp because in order to say that what we presently have in our food supply, we not only have a degraded food supply with not a lot of micronutrients and minerals, we also have a degraded food supply that does not contain natural cannabinoids. And science has been investigating and exploring the neurology of everybody here in this time and place that does not have effective cannabinoids. So they presumed erroneously that all of our neurology is a one-way street. Impulse goes from my brain down my neurological pathways to my big toe. And then my big toe touches something and it sends a neurological signal to my brain. And science looks at these as a one-way street. But what actually happens in a healthy neurology that has access to cannabinoids is that it is meant to be a two-way highway. So now let's go back to the whiteboard and I will show you here this, get my little stylus and a different color. So neurological impulses are supposed to be able to go not only in this direction, but also in this direction. So what happens when you have pain is you have a pain signal. Let's say your big toe is over here and you step on your big toe and it sends a pain signal. Ow, 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 ow. That's a pain signal. And it keeps going in this direction. And it doesn't stop. It keeps going. Pain, 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 pain in this direction. And let's say your brain gets the message. Your brain is like, okay, big toe, I got the message. I can tell that you're in pain down there. I don't need to feel that pain anymore because I got the message. According to science's definition and understanding of the neurology, like, there's nothing that can be done. It's a one-way street. But when the endocannabinoid system is active, what happens is, let's say these little green chemicals are cannabis. The neuron over here releases green chemicals in this direction. And it actually says to the red pain signal, it says, hey, stop, stop. You don't have to come in this direction. I got the message. I know you stubbed your toe. We got the message. It's okay. So this becomes a two-way highway, a two-way street of impulses coming from, like, you send out an impulse and then the impulse can be mitigated back to you. So this is very big. Science made erroneous presumptions about neurology being a one-way street. And when you actually get access to cannabis again, and it does not have to be psychedelic cannabis, like you're smoking a joint and then you want to listen to Jimi Hendrix, even though that's great if you want to do that. It can be dietary cannabis, where you make a wonderful smoothie and you drink it and you can still do your taxes and drive your car and think clearly. If you're doing that, then you are activating the two-way highway of your endocannabinoid system and you're mitigating the pain signals. Now I have to go back to the idea of the stellar network. I do need to turn around like this. Here we go. The stellar network. So we are supposed to be connected as consciousness to the stars and the entire stellar network, which is a neurology. And I've spoken about how the stars are like the creators of little art projects that are on different planets. And the art projects that are on different planets are not completely self-actualized, perfected divine beings. They've got problems. They've got egos. You know, we're on this planet, we're little humans, and we've got egos, and we've also been invaded. We're on the journey to becoming stars. We're not perfected and divine at that level yet. And what we're supposed to do is have a two-way highway where the sun sends out information to us. Here, you're going to sit down here. Sorry, I got to stand for a moment. Oh, so yes, like my lap is like numb. The sun sends out information and possibilities to us. And like life possibilities. So what photons are feelers, and I've talked about this before, how the sun sends out all of these possibilities to us, and then we have life experiences, and instead of sending them back directly, where's my hard drive? Like a live stream, what we're supposed to do is live stream our experiences here in the body. because of the genetic degradation, we can't live stream up until this point. And so what we do is store it on a hard drive. These are your memories. This is that big black dot that ends up on the membrane of death. You say, hey, I haven't been able to tell you to the sun, hey, son, I've been down here living my life for 40 however many years, and these are all of my life experiences. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about it when I actually had them. Now I'm dead. Here, read the book of my life. And that's antithetical to the way it's supposed to be. What you're supposed to be doing is doing a real-time broadcast in each moment of what you're experiencing. Like, hey, I'm drinking something good. This is what it sounds like, it feels like to the sun. I'm doing something that's fun and interesting. This is what it feels like, and what happens with the sun. So we are supposed to be connected to the sun and the stars and that neurology all the time, in rapport, sending signals back and forth, not as a one-way street. So our world, not only our microscopic world, microcosmic world since World War II, where we haven't had enough cannabinoids in our diet as a country, for all of human history, we have not been able to effectively have that two-way highway rapport between ourselves and the stars, the stellar network, the giant neurology that we're a part of. So all of the occupiers of the interstices, beings that ended up there, they are like the accumulated pain signals of this giant being that we live within. That membrane that I was just showing you there, that's filled with all of the hard drives of your life. And the challenge is it's filled with a lot of suffering, because when the life events that lead us to get to the membrane of death, they're effed up life events. They're not perfect life events. If they were perfect life events, we wouldn't be on the membrane of death. We wouldn't be at an angle like this. We'd be on the central core timeline, where you have the events that lead you to continued existence. So the events that make us go askew are painful events that cause our suffering. And that suffering and pain that we experience, that is not live streamed and broadcast directly back to the sun. If it were, if you're like, okay, here's my hand and I'm touching the stove, and I'm like touching the stove, and I send that signal back to my brain. My brain is like, hey, we better take that hand off the stove because it's suffering. It's doing something. Let's say that I put my hand on the stove and then it's there for 40 something years because we don't send a signal back to the brain that's saying, hey, something is going on down here. Then the hand dies, and I send back the hard drive that says, oh, by the way, I've been suffering for decades here in this life environment that is inadequate. And the sun is like, that's great. I wish I had known that decades ago. I would have actually done something about it, because the sun really cares about us, because we are the big toe. We're here. We're part of the body. We're not something separate or separated from the body. So our planet has been invaded. There are horrible monsters that smashed their guitars on stage, and they intentionally entered the membrane of death. They're over here, and they're supposed to be instantaneously going into a state of entropy, but they're not. They're like, nah, nanny, boo, boo, we're going to stay alive, and we're going to be like energy vampires and suck energy off of you so that we can keep on being here. They're the accumulated pain of the cosmos. And even the idea of the motivation. What would motivate a non-terrestrial being to act in that way? Everything about their behavioral motivation is motivated from pain and suffering and causes more pain and suffering. So this is all about the healing and rectification of the entire time field. I'm trying to say, I'm looking at my notes. I'm trying to say that just like when you eat cannabis, so what happens when you start to eat raw cannabis? It has an anti-inflammatory effect. It has an anti-cancer effect, an anti-seizure effect. It mitigates all of these aspects of metabolism because we used to have no biofeedback. So biofeedback is like you send out a signal and then you get something back. Like, oh, here's a signal, and then it's like, oh no, too much. Don't send so much anymore. So they say, I'll send you half as much. Much better. This is rapport, back and forth, back and forth. So if we are not able to have that level of rapport, that's when the body systems get hugely out of balance. That's what we're experiencing in the cosmos right now. The time system is hugely out of balance. The flow of consciousness, there's supposed to be a flow of consciousness that goes around this shape. That flow is impeded because there's supposed to be this area here that energy can flow through easily. Can't flow through easily. So here I use the example of the hallway in my home. That's supposed to be a transit area from this room into a different room. And that's not a living space. And if there were people that came into my room, they broke into my front door and they decided they were going to live in the hallway, and they set up a camp and tents and a little campfire, and they're cooking mini hot dogs over there. They're hobos. I would be like, no, you're not allowed to be there. You are intruders. You're invaders. You're not allowed to be there. And also, I can't get from this room into the back room because of you're in the hallway. You're stuck there. That is exactly what happened to our planet. We have hobos. We have planetary hobos. Hobos is a nice way of saying it. Fucking invaders. And they came here and they set themselves up and they're cooking mini hot dogs on the membrane of death, and energy cannot flow effectively around there. So we have blockages. Energy is supposed to flow around this in the larger time field, in the larger animal being within which we find ourselves. And that flow has been, stopped or diminished or impeded by these residues that need to be resolved or digested. It is also similar to saying like blood flows through your body, but let's say you have a artery that has a blockage because there's fatty deposits that are blocking up the flow of blood through that artery. What are those fatty deposits? Where does it come from? What's the fat? Fat comes from food that you ate but did not properly digest. So when you eat your food and you are completely embedded in the moment and you are completely connected to the stellar network and you're live streaming your hamburger, you're like, that tastes good. That tastes good. And the sun can hear it and the sun can taste it. It gets metabolized. It doesn't get stuck on your body. That's eating mindfully. When you eat in a way that is not mindfully, like I'm eating my hamburger, but I'm also like doing my work, I'm watching something on YouTube and I'm driving my car at the same time. I'm not tasting that hamburger. I'm not intentionally, consciously bringing it into my body and broadcasting that event as a live stream to the stellar network. I can't because I'm busy, distracted, thinking about other stuff. So what happens is that hamburger goes into storage, like a hard drive. It gets stored on your butt or your tummy. It gets stored on you. And the whole idea of pilgrimages, like a pilgrimage would be some of the religions of the Far East do a pilgrimage where you do perambulation. Like here's a sacred mountain, and you're gonna walk around that mountain 17 times. Or whatever, you're gonna walk from this mountain over here to that mountain over there that's 100 miles away. And the idea, it involves cardio, lots of cardio exercise, because the fatty deposits of unresolved emotional experiences are stored in various places in our body, inside your arteries and also as adipose tissue, that would be like subcutaneous fats, and also fats inside of your organs, deep internal fats. And when you do a lot of cardio, when you do it over a lot of time, like if you walk for 100 days, you go into the deep storage. Like if you just walk for one day, that's pretty good. You are getting, you are able to resolve all of the immediately available stuff. Like you can spend your cash. You'd be like, okay, good. Like I had $100 and I spent all the $100 that was available to me. But you've also got assets. Like let's say you've also got like a diamond that you can sell. You spent all your cash, but now you've got something that's stored up. You say, well, you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to take that diamond to the jeweler and I'm going to liquidate it, or I'm going to liquidate my real estate holdings and all of that stuff that's stored up, and I'm going to make it available as cash that I can then spend. That's what happens when you do 100-mile, long-term pilgrimage, or cardio over many months or days or weeks or years, that you're able to go into that fats and emotional experiences that are stored on a deep internal level. So it's transformative. Sweat lodges are also very effective for that. So I have one friend that I did a sweat lodge very regularly when I lived back in Woodstock, and for about 5 years or so, and with many of the same people who I would see every month when we would do this. And I saw one person really transform that. She transformed her body, and it was a lot of it had to do with emotional release, which is the idea of being in the sweat lodge. It wasn't just that the heat helped to release, subcutaneous fats. It was that it helped her to delve into the emotions that were stored in her body as fats. So I watched her transform as she, left an unfulfilling marriage and entered into a different career that was more fulfilling and gave her more independence and changed where she lived and everything like that. I saw her body change and I saw her life change. And all of this was because of accessing those stored emotional experiences so that they could be digested and healed. That's what healing is. Healing is the digestion of the fatty blockages that are stored up on the membrane of death. This does not mean hug and kiss a demon. No, because the expression of love to a demon or a stored up embodied, residue on this membrane would be to make it go to burn that fat, to be like, hey, you're not supposed to be sticking around like some lump. You're supposed to be dissolved and resolved and not be hanging around anymore. So wait, let me check all of my notes to make sure. Yes. Yes. Where does eternal consciousness reside? And this all matters because, we've got the peanut gallery. We've got the occupiers of the interstices. The fatty blockages are the loudest people in the band up until this point. They've been artificially amplified, synthetic or augmented telepathy. They're the ones who are constantly talking. They come in through our software vulnerabilities, which we considered both, genetic and intellectual programs that allow us to, a lot of it is verbal. It's a verbal vulnerability that allows these beings to essentially, the fatty blockages are talking to us, talking, and we are not able to effectively hear or tune into the beings that are on that time tunnel. When you were saying that you're in alignment with that path of least likelihood, and you look down the time tunnel, you're looking at ancestors from the deep past who made it, who passed the audition, and ancestors from the future who will pass the audition. And then you're in the band too. So up until this point, we have had the opposite of what we're supposed to have. The loudest musicians have been the worst musicians, the guys on the periphery who lost their instruments. They don't even have a body. They're not in existence. And they've been the loudest ones. And what we're supposed to be listening to are the good musicians who are the ones who actually transcended these levels of difficulty and play the good music, and they are nonverbal. And so this is a challenge of like getting out of the not verbalized mind and into the nonverbal mind. Wait. Sorry. Okay, so we have to talk about the beings who are stuck on the interstices are users of technology. They are not connected to the stellar network. So I hope that you are starting to see this connection here, that the stellar network is made of good musicians like you and me and the people that are on the path of least likelihood. I've said this before, that, spoiler alert, we are the stars. We become the stars. And I have to tell you, in my own experience, as I develop more, like I'm in the body and I'm developing my consciousness more and more, I see now no distinction between myself and the stars. The stars are me. Those points of consciousness are like neurons that are directly connected to my neurons. And I'm seeing that is, the truth of how we are connected. Sorry that you can tell I might be fatigued. I'm like losing my train of thought a little bit. The beings who use technology, they are apostate, or they've gone away from the stellar network. Because if you're on the stellar network, you don't need no stinking technology. You don't need a clank like metal spaceship to take you where you need to go. You just go there, and it's actually way better and more fun and satisfying than any of the other stuff that's going on. Do you want to come back up? Yeah, you want to come back up, honey? Come here. There you go. Come on up. There you go. So in order to heal our personal experience on this planet and no longer be invaded by crapheads, we need to heal the entire larger metabolism that we find ourselves within. Why are there consciousness residues? And so we're supposed to have this is a refinery of experience, where we are supposed to have some beings pass the audition and they become eternal. They're a song that keeps on being played. Like, that's a good song. We should remember that song. We should keep on playing it. It's good. And there's some songs that are super crappy, and they should not keep on being played. They are not worthy of being continued and built upon in the foundation in the symphony of life. And this shape is a graphic representation of those two things. So after you die, there is consciousness residue, and that residue, if you pass the audition, it's eternal. It lasts for forever. I want to say for effing ever. For effing ever. It never goes away. If you make something that lasts for effing ever, you want it to be good. You don't want it to be a pile of crap. So all the stuff that is a pile of crap, that's stuff that is not eternal. And it kind of is stuck in a little holding zone right now, but it shouldn't stay stuck in a holding zone, because we can't actually live effectively until we heal that holding zone. Can't get to the back bedroom because there's hobos cooking hot dogs in the hallway. So we have to heal this entire system. How do we heal this entire system? We heal the body with endocannabinoids. We heal the body's endocannabinoid system by ingesting endocannabinoids or making them available to the neurology so that we can mitigate those pain signals. What do we do in, like, you and me, not the tiny neurology inside of our body? What would be the analogy of that? The answer would be being able to reconnect to the sun and the stars and the stellar network and give a live stream. So that's like sending signals on a two-way superhighway as opposed to a little twisty, windy, one-way road that only takes signals from or to. We become connected to the stars through flying rainbow lasagna so that we can jump up and over the genetic limitations or rearrange the Rubik's Cube of our body and no longer have the limitations that we had before, so we can live stream. We can live stream all of our experiences, and in so doing, what we can do is transcend this system that's been the accumulated pain. So, and also we send the beings that are stuck on the interstices to entropy. And that means taking energy away from them, making them go from hot and moving to frozen and stationary. And that means frozen and stationary in time. You are fantastic. Let's have a kiss. Thank you for that kiss. I think I got through almost all. So it is we are healing the pain body of the entire metabolism of time. That's what we're doing. You know, if your life is hard, if you're down here on earth and you're like, wow, life is hard, things are really screwed up down here, it's because it's a tough gig. You're healing the entire pain body of this entire galaxy and time field. Because someone actually was talking with them last night. They wanted to know, is it just this planet that's like super satanic, or is this, I'm like, it's many planets. It's actually, I think probably rough estimate, like a quarter of our galaxy has been invaded and infested in this way. And it's not just our galaxy, it's every place. So the other takeaway or emphasis point is what we experience here in terms of planetary healing and personal healing in your own body. It's not just about this planet. There are many other planets that are similarly struggling for freedom from the fatty deposits that have been blocking up the interstices and preventing the effective flow of consciousness, because consciousness flows from planet to planet. You don't just always stay on one planet endlessly reincarnating. You actually, like, first you go to that gig, then you go to that gig, then you go to that gig. Like, you flow all over the place, but not when there are fatty blockages. So I'm just trying to lean forward here without disturbing my little princess too much so that I can squint and read. There we go, squint and read. So Joelle says, okay, good question. So if Jesus was supposed to be one of these masters that ascended and went up the central timeline, why did he think he had to die before that, unless that was added by the death cult? It's a really beautiful question, and I think that you have answered it yourself. My understanding is that the teacher who was actually here, an embodied human, we call him, Yeshua, to distinguish that from the more mythological persona that was created after his death by the church, named Jesus. I would say that Yeshua ascended, that he's part of the central core timeline and did not hang around like a slow release fatty deposit on the membrane of death, speaking into your mind verbally and telling you what to do. But you know who did do that? What would be considered or defined as Antichrist. That there is an actual malevolent being that might have thought that it was some kind of a savior or something like that, some kind of an actual embodied human sacrifice that did die and went onto the membrane of death and is still there right now after whatever, several thousands of years, still hasn't gone into entropy and might even be affecting your life, might even be talking to you or affecting reality. And meanwhile, it is not actually a fully realized divine being, because if it were, it wouldn't be dead. So the Christian church teaches us that Jesus was crucified and died and then somehow jumped off the membrane of death and was alive again, and that we should do something similar. We should all have crappy lives that are full of suffering, know that we're getting rich in heaven, die, and then somehow be resurrected or redeemed by the original human sacrifice and death of the mythological persona known as Jesus. And I teach something different. I'm not trying to condescend or make fun of anyone, but I think that does not make sense. The idea that you must die and then somehow be revivified. I don't think that anybody's getting revivified. I think what happens is you die and you go into a virtual reality fantasy realm on the membranes of death. Let's talk about this. What is the experience of going onto the membrane of death? What does it look like? What does it feel like? So my understanding is that it can look very much like this world that we're in right now. Like, wow, you know something? It's kind of like an extension of the dream. Like if this world, if you're, okay, I'm here in my house, and let's say I die a conventional death, I might still think that I'm living in my house. Oh, I got to go to the kitchen and make some scrambled eggs because I think I'm still alive and I still need to eat food. It is the worst type of death. The worst type of death is one where the experiencer does not recognize that they've actually died, and they still keep going through their same residual movements that they went through when they were alive. All the same things that they did in death, they keep doing in life. So I can tell you about the ghost story. My friend who lives in Kingston, New York, lived in a historical building that was built in the 1600s. And he told me that he saw a ghost in his apartment a couple of times. And it was a woman from Revolutionary War era wearing like a little bonnet. And that this ghost, all that it did was pick up a dish from like the table in the middle of the room and turn and kind of go to the other side of the room and like put the dish down. And that lady has been doing that for like 400 years. And that is a very sad thing to have to do for 400 years. It's a consciousness residue that has not been fully digested. It's a fatty deposit that has not been resolved. And that's a rather innocent one. Like, it's not like she was being raped or murdered or anything like that. When people are raped or murdered, those are they're traumas, they're pain, they're accumulated pain. It's a big fatty deposit. And it can take a long time for that to be resolved, for that to dissolve away so the energy can flow through there. It is my understanding that it's a total subversion of the truth, what the Christian religion teaches everyone, that a really wonderful teacher was here and died, but then somehow didn't die, and that you should have a similar experience, that you should willingly accept your death as inevitable, and then somehow believe through faith that you will come back to life again. And I don't think that that's what will really happen. I think it's a ruse where, oh, I think I came back to life, but you didn't really come back to life. You just got uploaded into like a fake world. And maybe the fake world looks a lot like this world. It's not true freedom is what I'm trying to say. We bend forward and squint. It says, what are your thoughts on Michael Newton's description of the afterlife, life between lives acquired by hypnotherapy? So I don't know his work, so I hope that I can't really speak to the person that you're talking about, but let me say about hypnotherapy and hypnotic regression and all these different systems that people are using. I'm highly skeptical of any information that comes to a person when they are under hypnosis that's guided by another person. Because I don't know anyone who is ethical enough to not influence the person that they are hypnotizing. I think there's a lot of ego from both sides that comes forward. It is not just pure perception. I think that they're like, so, you know, if you say to someone, oh, I'm going to read your past lives, and you tell them, oh, you're the guy that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Like, that's a heavy burden to bear and might not be truthful. And also, my understanding is that we have all lived every life. So to say, what are your past lives? Everybody's past lives is everybody's past lives, and that all these lives are being lived concurrently. So I consider it to be, first of all, highly unethical to sell your access to your insight and your perception like you were reading on someone else. And the reason why is that it's not the great librarian that's doing this reading. It's a human. It's a flawed human. And if I look at you and I say, oh yeah, you were Hitler in a past life, that's really going to affect you and your self-perception. And if I don't give you the balance and say, oh yeah, and you were also Jesus at the same time. You were Hitler and you were Jesus. Then you're going to, if I told you that, then you'd be like, okay, like, you know, one negative, one positive. So I'm balanced. But if I just tell you, no, you were a horrible axe murderer, you were Charles Manson, then you'd be like, oh my God, I was Charles Manson. You might become really guilty. You might, feel bad about who you are. And I have another friend, she's passed on at this point. She could remember, it wasn't from a hypnotherapy session, but she could remember that she had experiences in ancient Sumeria. She was horribly ashamed of what she had done. She thought that she was like a monster, and she was born with facial deformities. And she thought that that was like her punishment for what she did in ancient Sumeria. And I kept trying to tell her, like, that's not what I see at all. And focus on who you are right now. And I don't think that you're being punished by, what happened in your life. Like, I think actually her dad was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, and that's why she had facial deformities, not, because she did something bad in ancient Sumeria. So all of these things, like, I think that a lot of people are very vulnerable to guilt and shame and if a person reads you and it's like, I can sense you have guilt and shame inside, now we'll come up with the narrative to describe that. Oh, you're guilty and you're ashamed because you did this bad thing in a past life. So what I would say to my friend was like, hey, like, have an energetic firewall. Focus on the person that you are here and now. Don't focus on agency. Right? Like, try to be a good person here and now. And that's what I would say to everyone as the practical approach to the recognition that we are multidimensional beings having many different life experiences at once. Maintain your identity, maintain your like energetic firewall. Say, I'm this person in this body at this time, and this is what I'm doing here and now. And I take credit and responsibility for what I do here and now. So that's what I do with my life. So I know on some level, like, I'm God, I'm the divine being. I'm not the only person. I know we all are. This is, don't worry, I'm not a megalomaniac, but I know like that's who I am on a certain level. And also, I'm here, I'm Aurora. I need to buy toilet paper and I need to, whatever, take care of my dog. So it is a balance to understand these two levels of perception. And I understand I've lived as many other humans, many other non-humans, and it's all happening concurrently at the same time. So really our healing and rectification in this lifetime reverberates or spreads outward, both forward and backward in time into all of the other life experiences that we've had. So you don't have to focus on like, oh, I got to heal my ancient self. Oh, I got to heal my future self. Oh, I got to make sure I do this and this. No, just focus on who you are right here and right now. And also who we are right here and right now in this moment. We are amazing. We are miraculous people. And I don't think anyone gives himself enough credit for being here at this time. It is an incredibly difficult journey. My gig is hard. Everybody's gig is hard. It is very challenging to be here. The pollution, the mental pollution, physical pollution, mental pollution, lack of guidance, lack of camaraderie, because many of us do this journey, on our own, not like with a large support group. It's very, very challenging to be here. And also the work that we're doing is very worthy because what we do in this life, absolutely, there's timeline bleed through and we affect all the other timelines that we are on. So it's worth it. Sarah, so yeah, you just huge caution flags on anything. If someone does a reading for you, if someone says they're doing hypnotherapy, a hypnoregression or whatever, just huge caution flags on what you are perceiving, because I am not convinced that it is empirical truth, and it might be really, really distorted. Leaning closer so I can read this. Sarah Jane, good to see you, and thank you for being in the class. She says, does being disconnected from the stellar network have any effect on free will? Do the Pooties still have free will? Such a beautiful question. So our free will right now is subverted by the negative signals or the signals that we are receiving, like the interference that we're receiving all the time in terms of intellectual and consciousness and neurological disruption. If I say to you, hey, it's free will, you want to choose chocolate or vanilla, you get to say, hey, I use my own brain and I'm choosing chocolate because it's the best, let's face it. But if I say, hey, it's free will, chocolate or vanilla, and the whole time that you're trying to decide, I'm like poking you in the eyeball, whispering in the ear, sodomizing you, and pushing something into your mouth. Like, that's not free will. And that's literally what we experience here when each one of us is trying to make our own choices and our own assessments and even perceive the world clearly. We have been distorted. We are beset by lies and deception and distortions. And even, let's say, if you're in the ice cream shop and the word chocolate and vanilla are being presented to you, it might mean something totally different. Chocolate might mean a baseball bat that's filled with nails stuck into your brain. And vanilla might mean whatever, being boiled alive in oil. And the evil ones are like, which one do you want, chocolate or vanilla? And you're like, I choose vanilla. They're like, okay, cool, you just chose to be boiled in oil. Like, no. So they do all sorts of silly things where they change the meaning of words or distort the meaning of words so that when you are trying to express your free will, it comes out in a distorted fashion. I say this all the time. The world that we're in right now is meant to be a schoolhouse. A perfect reflection of your inner will. Your outer is supposed to be a perfect reflection of the inner so that you can learn, and send out better stuff. But we're in a fun house where what you send out sometimes doesn't come back to you, or it comes back to you in a distorted or diminished fashion, making learning very, very challenging in this time and place. So nothing about this is actually a schoolhouse. We're in a battle. And I try not to use the words of war, but it's just truthful. We are in a battle, and it is effing hard, and it's a rough gig, and we are fighting for our healing. We are fighting for the capacity to express our free will. So your wonderful question about, do the Putis still have free will? They had free will when they chose to go away from the source, not on a bridge of love. They had free will when they chose to smash their guitars on stage. They continue to have free will when they choose not to go into a state of entropy. And a lot of them, when I talk with them, I'm like, hey, go into a state of entropy. They're like, wah, 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 I don't know how to go into a state of entropy. I'm like, that's funny, because you knew how to do it way back when you went away from the source, not on a bridge of love. So they're very self-deceptive. They'll pretend like, oh, I don't know how to do this. It's, you say to them like, yo, like, pick up your dirty socks off the floor. They'll be like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Show me how. You'd be like, that's amazing, because I saw you do it 10,000 years ago. Like, how did you forget? So they're liars by nature. They are deceptive by nature. So yes, in this moment now, as they are stuck on the membrane of death, they have the free will choice not to torment people, not to siphon energy off of the living and off of, like, be an energy vampire. They have the choice to release all of their soul cage prisoners. They have the choice to go to entropy. So it is totally up to them what they do. And all of they'll whine and cry a lot. Wah, 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 it's not our fault, it's not our fault. But they have choices too that they can make. Pedro says, we should only imitate the ascension part of Jesus's life and the love part of his message, I think. I agree completely. A lot of the distortion of Jesus's story has been about, the suffering, the death, the crucifixion, the focus on his, last moments. And the meat and potatoes, I think, is really, potatoes, as my friend says, is really about, loving one another, giving to one another. Because people would think like, oh, no, it's about like, be a magic person and you can make magical fish appear and then you will feed everyone. Like, a lot of people get stuck on the idea of being a miracle worker. I'm like, I'm going to miraculously save you. I'm going to miraculously make food appear on your plate. I don't think it's just about being a miracle worker, but we can do things like that. I think it is about, what could be even described as basic secular humanism, caring for one another, treating others the way you would wish to be treated, and sharing resources. But please don't misinterpret me in any kind of like a totalitarianism, communist kind of way. It is more a sense of like, I think whatever, I have an innate desire to share what I have with others. When I have something good, I want to simply share it. And usually I am limited by the money system. I'm like, oh, I'd love to give you money, but I got to make sure I pay my own rent. So that's what limits me. So I think that many of us have that innate desire to express the truth of Christ's life through our own life, by helping other people, by giving to them generously, by taking care of one another. If we did that, then we would literally have a heavenly experience here on the planet. And that it's not about the necessity of suffering and death and the nobility of death and, so much of that, what that religion talks about. Pedro says, we are all everyone else. Yes, exactly. But not on their bad days, but on their ascension timelines. So we were Hitler on the best past life. Probably Hitler, the famous painter. Hitler would have been a painter and an artist and other things like that, and had a very different expression of life. So as all of us go from being askew and realign with our true core timeline and who we really are, we're doing that on this life and on all of our lives. So whoever and whatever we've been experiencing, the askew periphery, the selves that are not our true self, the maniacal, bloodthirsty maniacs and diminished, distorted aspects of self, those selves get healed and rectified. This is what we're doing in this time. This is why I say it's a rough gig, and it's an incredibly wonderful position to be in, because we can make so much improvement in our own lives and in all of these other lives that we're living. Basically what happens is you change your identity, you change your definition of self. So right now, humans say like, I define myself as my epidermis, this is my body, but hey, I extend my sense of self to my family. This is my family member. I definitely extend my bubble of self to encompass her. And I say, hey, you know something? I care about her. I'm not going to like let her starve or die. She's part of me. This is the dilation of identity. So we usually do that with our close family members. Sometimes we'll do that with tribes. Sometimes we'll do that all the way to countrymen, like to say, I'm an American citizen, you're an American citizen, and we consider ourselves to be, like we're in it together. And, ideally, that sense of identity can be dilated to include microbes, redwood trees, butterflies, dogs, all other humans, all life on this planet, all life, all consciousness. And when you do that, like, you become God. So yeah, I think this has been a long day, a long recording. Thank you guys for being on the marathon. I think that is actually a wonderful note for me to end the recording on, just because it's going to be a long upload, but we'll keep going in the chat. And thank you so much for everyone who tunes in and listens. And thank you for the new students who have been enrolling. It's really wonderful. Thank you.